What's going on, everybody? You've got the cardboard coach here with your boy, Coach Co. And team, today we have a very special guest on the podcast here today. We've got EJ FERRER. How are you doing today, man?
I'm good. I'm good. I'm in Vegas right now and just much cooler vibe as you could see. I'm wearing
Yeah.
that Fanatics Fest hoodie and finally excited to go outside and not get fried up in the heat.
Yeah, man. It's like 110 degrees there in the summertime.
It hit 120 and I remember looking at my wife and I'm like, you know what? I think this is time. I think it's time to go home. But no, Vegas is awesome. The community here is awesome. The hobby community here is incredible. It's just it's just another way of saying like, hey, it's home for me, right? So I'm just very very happy to be here in Vegas. But yeah, no, I mean the summer has definitely been challenging on the weather standpoint, but overall it's been great.
It's funny. I'm one of those fools. Well, not anymore, but I was one of those fools that used to think that it's like always hot in Vegas. And I went there in like March, and I remember leaving like Toronto and being like, I'm so excited to go somewhere that's gonna be warm. And although it was warmer-ish, I got there and it was probably like 55, 60 degrees, man. I
Oh
was like,
jeez.
I was like, this is fucking cold.
Yeah. Even like in December, like Christmas time, it'll like hail for a couple days.
I was
That's
dumbfounded,
pretty
man.
wild.
I
Yeah.
got I got shocked for sure because I didn't go with a jacket. I brought like one sweater. I was like, oh man, I definitely underdressed. So,
Oh, good.
brother, for those that don't know who you are part of the Fanatics events team. Someone who's had their hand in the most recent Fanatics Fest. I mean, first of all, congratulations on getting that thing off the ground and turning it into a tremendous success. At the very least, from like a community standpoint, from a standpoint of bringing value to people who went there. I mean, you guys truly created like a one of a kind experience, man. Like, walk me through that if you don't mind.
I mean, I'd be remiss if I didn't bring up my team, right? I mean,
Yeah,
our team consists of some of the best individuals in events in the event management space and coordinating space or even event directing space, right? So my boss, our CEO, Lance Fensterman, he pretty much spearheaded Reed Pop, which is notable for the New York Comic Con, Star Wars celebrations, the complex cons of the worlds, and one of the biggest things that we wanted to create here with the vision of Michael Rubin was creating a Comic Con for sports, right? And creating a more elevated experience. And a lot of people that may not know, I come from the card show world. I co-founded the Burbank Card Show alongside Rob Veras from Burbank Sportscards, as well as Jay, who you know as the guy who's always grumpy. I call him the big grump, but overall, he's like a big brother that I never wanted. But the Burbank card shows of the worlds, the national, the worlds, we wanted to not necessarily replace that experience, but more so elevate that experience, right? Because I say this all the time is the card show experience is going to be the foundation of our hobby. That is what you and I both love, right? And that buy, sell, and trade aspect is great. You see some of the top dealers at all these shows, you see some of the top collectors at all these shows, but we saw that need of providing that bridge and that open conversation and an open door for more fans, sports fans, to become collectors. More of an opening, right? And that's
yeah,
where Fanatics Fest lied on was it's very much a sports festival. It was very much a place where you could really enjoy, not necessarily on a sense of just sports cards, but also enjoy the experiences that we had. And may I say that was such an incredible win for our team, but also an incredible win for the hobby, an incredible win for more folks to see that there is a better way of collecting outside of just whatever they're collecting now. And I think that ultimately we'd love to kind of see that more as a way for more folks to not only create that avenue of enjoying the hobby and collecting, but also enjoying that avenue of experiencing the hobby
yeah,
through these experiences that we could implement at our shows.
yeah. It's funny too because as much as collecting is about sports, I feel like sports sometimes get lost. It gets lost. Do you know what I mean? Like we collect, but a lot of us don't attend as much, and we opt for boxes and TV versus like the actual experience, and like a lot of that has to do with like price points, which I can respect. But creating an experience where like all of that atmosphere, all of all that fandom is kind of in the same spot, I think is really special. I mean, I've spoken to so many people who have highlighted, not even the celebrities or like they talked about the activations, man. They talked about like being in an octagon. They talked about doing the WWE entrance. Like just like things that fans want to do. And I think that that is so cool. And also having collectibles there as well. You know what I mean? Like we love collectibles. We love sports cards. It's not the be all and the end all. And if we're gonna get more people in this industry, and I guess we don't necessarily have to, but if we want to give them the option, we want to introduce it to them. I personally think that everybody collects something, so it's just a matter of like someone finding what it is that they want to collect. So, man, kudos to you. And you mentioned the Burbank card show. That's kind of like not your origin story, but do you want to talk a little bit about, what role you played in that and where that vision came from?
Well, I mean, before I even get started on that,
Yeah.
right? Like going back to Fanatics Fest is my ultimate goal at Fanatics Fest and all of our events moving forward is to really amplify the card show portion of that also, right? So having the best dealers that our hobby has to showcase a better opportunity for these sports fans to. And I think that was probably the biggest feedback that I got is we got a lot of fans that literally went to the dealer booths and bought Jalen Brunson cards and bought cards for their PC and really didn't even know how to comp a card or didn't know how to properly buy, sell, and trade, right? And the incredible part of my job is I get to work with some of the dealers all over the country and the world on a daily basis, and not one day goes by where it's the same day, right? Every story is different with some of these folks. Some of these folks are full time. Some of these folks, this is their business that they've had for years, and then there's some folks where this is their side hustle. There's some that this is something that they've only done post COVID, right? Like this is, and it's incredible to see because the way I see it is that these are the movers and shakers of the hobby, are the folks that are really understanding, okay, well, this card is hot, this card is this. And overall, that's something that I would love to see the growth on. And that stems from our Orlando show, which we'll talk more about it in the future. But getting back into my origin story, I outside of doing events back in my college days and I didn't really have a background in events. I didn't really have a background and I never knew as a kid that used to sneak into events and used to for those of you guys that are big gaming fans, I used to sneak into E3 back when it was in LA. If anyone in E3 was watching, sorry. But
Yeah.
at the time it was a very B2B show, so the public wasn't allowed at the time. And
Yeah.
I was a big Call of Duty fan. I was a big NBA 2K fan. And then at the time, Final Fantasy just came out, and I was a big Final Fantasy fan. I really wanted to get that inside scoop, so I did what I can to get into the LA Convention Center and again, I was a young kid, right? So
Yeah.
outside of that, I never had aspirations of getting into events. So fast track to the 2021 in California. I'm from Southern California. I'm from Long Beach, California, and this was, of course, this was pandemic era where there was so much going on and there was very little events outside of the Dallas card show, right? And I believe the National, it skipped one of the years and then it came back in Chicago the following year. But this is at the time where everyone was wearing masks and all the shows were like in little boys and girls clubs, church halls. There was even a show in Southern California that was in a pet store. And can you imagine Coleman's cards, myself, Sasha, you got all like the top dealers there from Southern California, and we're all in this little pet store, and we're just like, it was just so crazy. But some of the craziest deals happened at that pet store,
Yeah.
So it was kind of one of those like if you know you know type of shows, where it was like 20 table shows, 30 table shows. Well, anyway, so it was the summer. We were just talking about the heat, and one of the shows, it was in a boys and girls club, and it didn't have AC. And this was like in the start of June, so the heat was coming up, and I had two buddies of mine that I went to college with, and they had just had that like incredible idea of like, you know what? They're in church ministry that worked, right? So they have a gym at their church. And what they had done was they had cleaned up their gymnasium, which was a very nice gymnasium that had AC. They were like, EJ, would you like to host a card show here? And at the time, I was just like, no, like, I'm cool. I just like to show because I was a dealer myself. I started
Yeah.
off as a trading card dealer. And it took about like five calls for them to finally like we were at a BJ's. I don't know if there's a BJ in Canada, but a BJ's restaurant. I don't know if you're familiar with BJ's,
I'm
but
not.
um BJ's is like a pub slash restaurant here in
Okay.
Northern America, and they have this thing called a pizookie, and a pizookie is a it's a it's a it's a little cookie that they put in the oven for 15 minutes, and then they put ice cream on top. And I was like really craving it. I told
Sounds delicious.
my then partner Ryan, I was like, hey, if you buy this for me, I'll agree to help you guys out with the show. So he buys it for me, and then we had a pretty much like a notebook and said, "Hey, I EJ agree to do this," which is called the Newport Card Show, which is now a once or twice a year card show in Newport Beach in South Orange County. And at the time, it was scary. It was scary, Coach, to even think of filling 50 tables. Right? It was so scary to me. I was just so nervous of even hitting up someone like, "Hey, would you be interested in being at my show?" And looking back at it now, that really wasn't that long. Like I'm
Hmm.
at Fanatics now running our dealer relation side, and that was like literally maybe 3 years
That's
ago.
what I mean.
Where at
Yeah.
the time I was just very much like, oh, I don't know, like. So I made a few calls, and this is a testament to the hobby and my relationships with the folks locally. They showed up. We sold out. We sold 120 tables at the show. Man, it felt like I filled the national. Like it was incredible, and it was a very small high school sized basketball gymnasium, but it ended up being some of the best times of my life. And I ran three of those shows, and I got a phone call from Jay, who's was he pretty much runs the Burbank Card Show now. And at the time, I was in between careers, and I had just moved to Las Vegas, and I got a call from Jay, and Jay had basically said, "Hey, would you like to be a part of this project with Burbank Sports Cards?" And at the time, I knew Ryan because of the deals that we've done in the past. I was a
Yeah.
big Kobe collector. Ryan Veras, who's one of the founders also at Burbank Sports Cards, and he's like, "Hey, I want to introduce you to my dad, Rob." And I've never had an interaction with Rob, and all I saw was Rob on Instagram, right? Like
Yeah.
that was all I saw was Rob on
Yeah.
Instagram. So I knew the Rob that all you guys knew, right? So I was
Yeah.
like, man, this dude's probably just, he's an act. He's probably not even. Dude, first call with Rob. It was literally like I was talking to him on Instagram, right? And I will say this before I even get onto any other conversation about Burbank or anything else. I have never met anyone in our industry that loves this industry more than Rob Veras. This man eats, sleeps, breathes the hobby. And it was something where like I didn't even know what to expect. And all I remember was I get into Burbank at the shop, and we're in this meeting, and Rob's like, "Hey, I'm thinking about doing I want to do shows every month at the Elk Lounge." And basically in full respect factor here, the Elk Lounge is where the elderly folks hang out, and it's not necessarily the space to host one of the bigger card shows in the country and the world.
Yeah.
And we're flying here, but I'll just backtrack a little bit more. My background's in marketing and in sales. I was in the sneaker industry early on in my career, and I had this pitch deck that I had made on my in my computer that I've had for years. It was one of those things where you could put it on PowerPoint and you could just change it.
Yeah.
And I basically was like, you know what? Burbank Sports Cards has a very notable brand. And at the time, there wasn't really a card show that big outside of the Dallas card show and the National,
Yeah.
right? And I was like, look, if I'm going to be a part of this, I think we need to go big. I think we need to go big or go home, right? And I had sent this pitch deck and I had showcased it. I made this pitch deck outside. If you've ever been to the Burbank sports cards shop, it's in Burbank Boulevard and there's a Costco right there. And I was getting gas at that Costco and I literally park at that Costco. I open up my laptop and I literally just make this pitch deck within like 10, 15 minutes. I go back to Rob and Jay and I'm like, look, this is my vision for the show. And I literally throw every idea that I had within those 15 minutes of turning into the show. Of course, no relationships with any of these sponsors, no relationships with any of these dealers outside of a Coleman's Cards
Mhm.
and a couple others locally. And literally within like 5 minutes, Rob goes, "Sounds expensive, but let's how do we get this done? How do we start this off?" And I didn't think anything of it until a couple days later. Jay, and this is to Jay's credit, Jay is a an ops machine. He was able to find a location within 5 minutes away from the shop, which happens to be the Burbank Marriott, which is literally walking distance away from the Burbank airport. And it was some of the craziest 9 months of my life. A lot of people don't know this is I went full time blindly in the hobby because I knew that in order for this to be successful, I would have to go full time just because Rob was busy with the shop and Jay also had his career outside of cards. So I had to kind of take lead in the relations dealer side of it and growing that list um and ultimately, man, till this day, it's still the greatest card show that I've ever seen. It was incredible. We had, and this isn't necessarily a good thing to say, but like we had a 2 3 hour line. Fire marshal was definitely on us that day. But overall, just the relationship with the city, the relationship with the venue was incredible. But we knew that it needed to be bigger, and hence why Ontario, I mean, not Ontario, California, not
Yeah,
Ontario,
yeah, I know.
Canada.
Yeah.
But Ontario was our next feat, and then Anaheim was such a dream location for me because I used to go. My first national was actually '06. I went with my dad at the Anaheim Convention Center when I was 13 years old, and going back now, hindsight is like it's all. I'm a very emotional, very much like I love looking back on a sense of like, wow, like this is crazy how blessed my life truly is now I used to go to these shows as a kid and now I get to host these shows. So Burbank Anaheim was such a dream come true for me just because it was kind of a coming home party for myself. And that's kind of how everything went for me with Burbank was just seeing that vision that we didn't really have anything in the West Coast, right? And I always tell folks, especially fellow card promoters that are looking to get into starting their own card show or starting their own card business or even card shop, is I always tell them like community. Always start with community, build your community, build it up. Don't worry about what you can't control, build on what you can control, build on your relationships. If you could only do a show with 10 dealers, make it the best 10 dealer show ever. Make it the best and focus on community. Focus on what you could provide for the community. If there's a lack of a kids event that's going on in your community, lean on a kids event and grow that event. Whether you're in Mississauga, whether you're in Austin, Texas, or whether you're in every part of wherever you are around the world, there is always some sort of a community. And I think that is missed. That is more focused on not necessarily growing, but more on outreach. And I feel like that's such a missed opportunity for a lot of folks that I see is they focus a lot more on the financial side of it, which is great, right? There's a financial barrier to it, hence why I have a job. But I think beyond that is people fail to forget of that opportunity of growing that community because without a community, you don't have anything,
Yeah.
right? And I feel going back to what we had talked about with the hobby, where this is, in my opinion, the best community, best collectible community out there. You're talking about a community filled with people. Yes, there's negatives aside, and there's also positives with that. And I lean more on the positive side, where you've seen it before, where if someone has a lost card, there's an endless amount of people that reshares it, repost it. Hey guys, make sure you guys look out for this card. If you guys see this card, make sure you guys hit up the owner. Here's his Instagram. That is some of the best community that I've ever seen. And I'm so proud to be a part of that, because not only is it that, but it's also, hey, Coach O has a trade night. Let's come by. It's on Friday. It's this. Oh, I'm pulling up. Are you coming? Oh yeah, yeah. I may not come, but you should come because I got work. That community side is incredible. And I think the biggest example that I could give to someone that's not in the hobby is whenever it's like, hey, Coach O, who do you PC coach?
I mean, I PC lots. I PC a lot of soccer stickers. I PC tickets. like yeah,
So, like, for example, if you're like a big Messi fan, right? And
yeah,
you're a Messi sticker guy, oh, hit up Coach. He's a sticker guy. And you know that, like, okay, if I'm a Kobe PCer, okay, hit up EJ because EJ may be interested in this piece.
yeah,
Or hit up so and so because he may be able to find this piece for you. That is some of the best community that I've ever seen. And
yeah,
that's just Instagram. Imagine what I'm missing out on here in Vegas, what I'm missing out on in Canada, what I'm missing out on in different parts of the country that is way more prevalent than it is when you and I first started, right?
yeah,
So going back to the show side, like, to me, when I first started, a 20-30 table show was a great show. Now, if you got to have at least 200 tables to have a great show, right? So
yeah.
uh things have changed, but just overall, just it's been incredible. The community has been incredible. And man, that's just kind of a quick gist of my journey into the hobby, in turn now being full time in this industry.
I love that, man, and I love the fact that like you started grassroots and you kind of jumped in head first without really knowing. I feel like a lot of good origin stories start that way. And what you've been able to accomplish in it's not a short period of time. It's like 3 years can be either really long or really short, and they're really long if you're constantly on the grind and making adjustments and taking risks and also learning constantly. And I think that you've been doing that. So it's been awesome to just see even your trajectory from someone I knew of but didn't really know very well, and now you seem to have your hands in so many different uh events and just like amazing moments moving forward in this hobby. So I mean, kudos to you, brother. Um, you mentioned briefly Fanatics Fest Orlando. It's upcoming November. You kind of mentioned that there's gonna be a little bit more of a sports card side. You teased that. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so the official show name is Fanatics Collect Orlando, which ties in with our new division, Fanatics Collect. And I'm very proud that there is more of a focus on collecting, because again, that is the community that you and I had just talked about. And I think that this is something that is going to be a great step into our version of a card show, our
Yeah.
version of a collectible show, but a bit more elevated in the experience side. And that's something that we coin as, we want to be known as very fan facing. We want to be known as very fan interactive, not just necessarily buy, sell, and trade, but also something for everyone, something for the average family of four. The one thing that I always get, Lance had always said this was, hey, for think of the fan, think of that fan, and think of the time that they spend at the show, and the ticket cost that they spend at the show. Um, the time that they spend outweighs that cost, right? So I believe our ticket sales are $25. We want to make sure that $25 that that customer spends, the time that they spend, the enjoyment that they have at the show, the the connections and the conversations and just the overall good times that they have at that show outweighs the $25 that they spend.
Yeah.
It outweighs the time that they invested. Like,
Yeah.
that is something that, like, to me personally, that changed my way of my daily workload. That changes my way of how I handle meetings and how I handle calls, because ultimately the biggest priority are the fans. The biggest priority when we do these shows are the collectors. And that is something that we want to take full priority in, is understanding that. And again, not necessarily just young collectors, right? And new collectors, but also collectors that may have collected 20 years ago, and collectors that may have collected 4 years ago and just didn't really have a great time, or maybe have unfortunately got burned. And
Yeah.
that's something that we want to create, that environment where, like, that's really unfortunate, but give the hobby another shot within our experience, right? And within our shows, and being able to reintroduce that hobby to them. And I work with a lot of folks that are incredible event folks. And that's something that is very much missing, even from my time at Burbank, where even though that time was very much special, I knew that I needed to get better. I
Yeah.
needed to learn more about fan experiencing. And overall, yeah, I go back to the area where my stepsister, she works for the Marriott, and she's in hospitality. And one of the things that she always has something to say about our, like, different tips and
Yeah, of
tricks.
course.
And she's one to listen to, because again, she works in hospitality. And one of the things that she always brings up, and I love every bit of it, is she brings up that for every ask is five answers. And that was one thing that I've always stuck to my head, was for every ask that a collector, a fan asks, I have to make sure that they get answered fivefold. And those answers stem from the decisions that I make and my team makes on a daily basis. To where at the end of the day, if we're able to answer that question, or solve that problem that we may have, it will come back fivefold or even more. And that's something that we always specify with our group here, is very much fan engaging, very much, how do we are we able to make this fans time at our show so enjoyable that they go to their neighbor and be like, hey, you got to pull up to the next Fanatics Fest.
Yeah.
You got to pull up to the next Fanatics Orlando. Oh, dude, you got a problem. Your problem is you're a Jalen Brunson fan, but you're so tired of collecting the same Jalen Brunson card. Well, go to Fanatics Fest and you'll find a Jalen Brunson auto, or a Jalen Brunson this and Jalen Brunson that. Ultimately, it's a chain reaction of folks that will ultimately come to your shows, and that starts with A, community, and that starts with B, solving that problem.
Yeah, and I think that seems to be like the general message from Fanatics, whether they say it out loud or not, right? Like, I mean, we just had the Tops Rip Night last weekend, and from personal experience, working fairly closely with Skybox and just seeing the way that the community came out and seeing so many people who you probably wouldn't normally see at a card show or maybe even a card shop. Like, there's people from all different walks of life that came and they're like, oh, like, we heard this is like a family friendly event. Like, my kid likes like likes cards in some, like, to some degree. There's like free food and there's games and like the doors wide open and there's other kids and the kids play soccer together or whatever the case may be. Like, you just saw so many moments where everyday people were introduced to the space in such a positive manner through like genuine experience. And I was like, every time I don't know, have doubts is what I want to lean on. But like every time I worry about the industry or, to your point, like you hear these like negative things or something bad happens or whatever the case may be, I go to these live events, whether it's a card show, whether it's, going to a local card shop or whether it's going to Topps Hobby Rip Night. And I'm just reminded that like if done or when done correctly, this hobby is one of the greatest places in the whole world. And I think that there's something for everyone in this space. To your point, there's opportunities to improve, and there's things that we all feel like we could probably do better with. But at the end of the day, like there's just very few communities that are so welcoming that really kind of, yeah, they just keep pushing for more and keep pushing for that community element. Like it is quite wonderful, man.
Yeah, no. And again, I may not know how it looks at Skybox and as the
Yeah.
community over here. I may not know how it looks on your end, but I think one thing that I do know is that there is that sense of togetherness within the hobby, and I feel that it's stronger than ever. And the new people that I see, especially when I go to the shows, I remember going to Burbank after Fanatics Fest, and half of the dealers, I'd like to say maybe I'd say a safe side, half of the dealers I either have seen as a collector and now turned into as a dealer, or I've never seen them before. And that's such a great sign for our industry and our hobby as a whole, right? Is just seeing the new people, and whether they do that full time or part time, right? Like these are people that ultimately have spent hours in our industry, days, months, years into our hobby, right? And I think that yes, there are times, and me included here, where it's called hobby burnout, right? Where sometimes you do get burned out.
Yeah,
Sometimes, and I tell folks like, hey, there's there's uh there is not there is not an ill will towards somebody taking a break. There is not. I have a dealer that I'm not going to say his or her name, but we had a very lengthy talk, and he had mentioned that, hey, just Fanatics Fest New York, I just couldn't swing it. I just wasn't. Yeah, I just wasn't there, right? I wasn't there financially. I wasn't there on a business level, and honestly, I'm just pretty burnt out, right? And we had this very lengthy conversation, and I was trying to think of ways of mediating a conversation like that. And one of the biggest things that I think he spoke very highly of was just the sense of, hey, I've been doing this for 7 years straight. Um, it's to a point where, you know what, it's been very transactional that I need to take a quick break. And sure enough, he or she called me um, a few days later saying that they're going to be in Orlando as a dealer back again for the show. But that stemmed from just that time spent, right? That time spent of recharging your batteries, and that time spent of realizing that it's not necessarily the transactional side, even though yes, that's great. You and I have both enjoy that factor of
of
buy,
course.
sell, and trade.
Yeah,
But I think beyond that, it was basically he had said that the conversations and the relationships and the friendships that he's built outweighed the time that he spent away, and he missed it, and he realized that that was such a big part of his life, that he attended some local shows, and it ultimately sparked that fire again for him. And it goes back to ultimately you realize that this industry and the hobby in general, there's a lot of folks that are very much helpful folks, and more so collectors that are very much willing to go above and beyond, and our collectors that are very much like, hey, if you don't make it to a show, hey, I'm looking out. I'll look out for a card that you may be interested
yeah,
in. I think of my friend Jesse, who is based in Southern California, and he's a big '90s collector. I'm a big '90s basketball collector too. Not as big as him and all of my other friends, but I enjoy that side of the hobby and that side of collecting. And he's a big EX96 collector. I think he's about three cards away. I think the only one missing outside of Sean Bradley. I think he already got Sean Bradley, but I think he just needs that MJ, which happens to be the most expensive one. But every show that I've been to, I've always looked out for that EX credential card for him, or that EX credential, so that he finishes his collection, right, or his PC. And I think that that's not necessarily of EJ being a good person. That's just kind of just the nature of the beast of like,
yeah,
oh, dude, that's something that coach may want, or that's
yeah,
something that Stephanie Mama Breaks may want, or that's something that, maybe EJ may be interested in. You just do the little, you take a
yeah,
picture.
yeah,
Excuse me, can I look at that card real quick? And you take a picture. Like, as minute as that sounds, like that is very much another way of just someone experiencing the hobby
yeah,
outside of being at a show or being at a shop, is that the relationship factor of it. No, dude, I love talking about the relationships that I build. And even on my end, where I'm really, really blessed, and just everything that I look back on has been very much relationship heavy, even from the Newport days to the Burbank days to even now at Fanatics, where it was very much relationship based, right? And just closing in this is, I feel like there's a ton more opportunity for that, and I feel that that will ultimately grow the hobby even more. And I haven't even brought up any sort of product. I haven't even brought up any sort of, buy and sell and trade tips or
Yeah.
going to a card show or being a dealer at a card show. Just specifying community is so big that ultimately I see our industry growing much further than it is now.
Well, I mean, it sounds like the community is in good hands, and the hobby is in good hands, and Fanatics events are in good hands. So, man, I really appreciate you taking the time, jump on here today, talk a little bit about yourself as well as kind of the direction that Fanatics is heading in with respect to their live experiences. So, appreciate you, man.
Yeah, no problem.
If someone wanted to get involved with Fanatics Fest in Orlando, how can they reach out to you? How can they, buy a ticket, be a dealer?
FanaticsCollectOrlando.com. Tickets are now on sales. Our sales are now on sale. And if you would like to become a dealer at our show, hopefully this comes out sooner rather than later. Feel free to reach out to me, dynasty.ej on Instagram or on Fanatics Collect Orlando. Hit that dealer tab and you will see a direct dealer application portal where you will be able to apply to become a dealer to our show.
Perfect. Team, I hope you enjoyed this week's episode of the Cardboard Coach featuring EJ Fanatics Fest. And I'm excited to see all of you in Orlando, hopefully, and yourself included, man. So thanks for taking the time.
Coach, thank you so much. You're such a light into this, into our industry and into our hobby, and excited to see you keep going, brother.
Appreciate you. Take care, brother.